So, today's sacrificial victim. We have a Retina IIS camera. Well, the Retina IIS is a pretty uncommon model, you don't see many of them about. It was like the little brother to the 3S. It's on a smaller chassis, same size chassis as the Retina 3C or the Retinettes. It has a 45mm standard lens, which is not interchangeable. It's a Xenar lens, f2.8. The lens is front self-focusing, it's not a helical mount. In other ways, it's much like the Retina 3S camera. It has a coupled exposure meter. We have the aperture depth of field pointers on the front of the lens there move as you change the aperture. And all in all, they're quite a nice little camera. Good bright viewfinder, very nice camera to use. This one's here for service. I've had a quick look at it. Its main problem really is that the shutter needs to be serviced. The slow speeds in particular either don't run or run very slowly. Oh, it's running quite well today. It was not running yesterday. So it needs to be completely stripped and serviced. It probably hasn't been done in a long time. It does have a sticker inside. We'll see what that says. Kodak Australasia, which probably means it's been serviced in Australia or New Zealand most likely. And I'm trying to see if there are any numbers there I can decipher as a date. But to be perfectly honest, the numbers don't mean anything to me. There are marks there. They all look to be in much the same hand really, very tiny writing. I can't really decipher them. I doubt you could even see them on there. They're in green ink. And possibly they were all written at the same time. And perhaps those hieroglyphics mean something, or did at least to the person who wrote them there. Anyway, back to the job in hand, get this camera apart. So where will I start? Oh, at the top of the camera, I think. Off with the rewind. Pop those to one side. And the top cover. The plastic piece here on the meter, that's unbroken. That's nice. They're very often cracked from people being exceptionally rough when they are attempting to change the film speed and sticking their big fat finger on the top and pressing as hard as they can and pushing in the plastic window along with the button. The plastic does deteriorate with age, become more brittle and more fragile with it. I'm looking at the state of that window and it all looks original and it all looks good. So on the top we have the meter button and its return spring, which is a very small spring and easily lost. In fact, even commonly lost would be fair to say. I've seen a few cameras lately where that's been missing or been replaced with something completely unsuitable. Two screws hold the rangefinder to the top of the casting. The screw hole here passes right in front of that front surface mirror, so you need to be quite careful when you put your screwdriver down there that you don't scrape your screwdriver down the face of the mirror, or you won't like the result. I'll remove the screws from the strap lug at this end, take that off the camera. None of these screws are rattling loose. It's not uncommon to open up cameras and find that screws are loose all over the place. I'm going to put the top cover back on temporarily because I don't want to disturb the meter, and then we can look at the path of the meter coupling cord, which is different from that used on the Retina IIS. Let's have the bottom of the camera open. The leatherette patch there, that's been off before. I could tell because the grain ran the other way, so I knew somebody had put it back on the other way, which is not exactly a great crime. But I could tell also that the adhesive was not the original adhesive. Well, we know the camera has been serviced before, so it's not surprising to find that someone had had that lever off. So here I'll just remove the back catch cover. Put its return spring carefully aside. 3 screws hold the advance lever in place. That screw was not particularly tight. That one certainly wasn't. Neither was that one. Something a bit unusual here, there's a bit of a tide mark around here. It looks like grease or wax. It looks more like wax than it does like grease, like someone had polished the bottom of the camera perhaps, and that was wax that was left over from the process. See if this leatherette will lift for us. I'm carefully sliding my scalpel underneath that leatherette. And I'm peeling the leatherette off more than anything else. The leatherette is stuck down unevenly. That's not at all uncommon. It's quite common for adhesives to react differently to the chromed brass plate than they might do to the aluminium body. Of course, 60 years on, there are no new replacement leatherettes, and if you strike any being sold, they are 60 years old too, and not having had the benefit of being stuck on a camera for the last 60 years, they will have shrunken most likely. If you try fitting them to a camera, even though they look very good, you'll discover that they're not long enough, and that the distance between the hole here and the hole here and the hole here are too short, and they won't stretch nicely to fit the camera. So it's all important to get your leatherettes off ideally in one piece and undamaged, and failing that, in one piece with some slight damage, because cracks and cuts can always be disguised later. Some small cracks or cuts don't even need to be disguised. Once the leatherette's glued back in place, they are completely invisible. Anyway, that leatherette came off smoothly. Some come off even easier than that. Typically when there is corrosion underneath the leatherette, and that has effectively caused the adhesive to start to fail. I can see the camera flashing at me that the battery's going flat. I'll just change that and be back. Let's carry on here. That screw slot was a little bit hard to access. It was a bit clogged up with adhesive. Take the chrome trim off the bottom. That's all good, no surprises under here. I see some grit here, some sand. That's definitely been to the beach. Otherwise nothing particularly untoward. Now I want to peel my leatherettes from the front. The leatherette's tucked under the centre here, so it's a little bit tricky to lift off. I'm starting here at the catch end of the casting. The leatherette feels quite well stuck. The hardest part to get the leatherette off is right here on the edge of the body. That sharp crease in the leatherette makes the leatherette, it sticks better at that point. And it makes the leatherette vulnerable to cracking at that point. Once I've got the leatherette peeling back to this point where it's more on the flat of the body, the going is easier. And this leatherette is stuck much more firmly than the leatherette on the front of the body was stuck. On the base of the body rather. There we have it off. So that's corrosion. That white stuff you see there will be aluminium salts or oxides from that front of the body. That just means moisture has been penetrated the leatherettes at that point. Perhaps the camera was handled with damp hands at some stage, where the corrosion is extensive. You can usually say that the camera's probably been stored in some damp place, either humid atmosphere or out in a cold damp shed or something of that nature. So I'm trying to get the leatherette loose from the end again, from the hinge end this time. When the leatherettes were new, they would have been very pliable. They're not very pliable now. There we go. Again, a patch of corrosion right there on the body, and all this rubbish here, which is dried adhesive, crumbling dried adhesive, probably some fine threads from the back of the leatherette and corrosion. That'll all have to be cleaned off. So we've got 4 screws hold the front of the body in place. One of the screws is hidden under this Kodak nameplate, and I want to get that off undamaged. So I'll need some solvent to help me with that. I don't know what adhesive has been used on here, but I'm just going to apply a drop of acetone to the edge of that nameplate. Hopefully it'll soak down under the edge. And this is worth being patient with this. What I normally find is if you poke at it with a wooden toothpick, I can see that that solvent is bubbling at this point right here, which means that the nameplate is loose at that point and the solvent is underneath it. So I'll put another drop of solvent right there. What I want, of course, is the solvent to penetrate all the way underneath that nameplate, soften any adhesive, so that I can lift this nameplate off undamaged. The nameplate, of course, is aluminium. It's very thin, and any damage to the surface looks very obvious. If you're impatient, you can push a pin under here, or the edge of a scalpel blade or something of that nature, and that will certainly pry the label off quicker, but you risk doing a lot of damage to it in the process. Yeah, I can see it coming out all the way around that label now. That label is pretty much loose. If I push it in the right place, it'll probably come off. Let's see if I can get the drop of solvent. Right, I'll try getting a fingernail under the edge of that label. That's it. That's it off. One undamaged Kodak nameplate. That's good. You will see cameras that have been serviced previously where the nameplate has been damaged or lost, and that this area has been covered with a typically a piece of black leatherette. Now 4 screws hold the front of the body on. This screw, it was unusually tight. And let's see if I can get the front to lift off without disturbing the cable. I can. Okay. So we have our shutter assembly and the front of the camera all off there together. That's all looking quite good. Looking at the back of that lens, I can see some marks on the back of that lens. Hopefully they'll clean away. Yeah, one of them's certainly a fingerprint. And here we can see the path of the coupling cord for the meter, and as you can see on a Retina IIS camera, our drum would be at the base of the camera, or a Retina Reflex S for that matter. The drum would be at the base of the camera here, and the cord would come down here and around the drum at this point. Here the drum is over at this point, and there is a separate idler sitting here, idler pulley, that the cord runs around. So you need to take great note of which direction, where the cord runs from on the front of the pulley or the rear of the pulley, where they run around the idler pulley and where they run onto the drum, and indeed the position of the drum. Normally I set the meter at ASA 10, and I'm just holding down the meter as the button would hold it down. I'll set that to ASA 10. And if I'd been cunning, I would have also had the shutter set and aperture set to say B at f2.8, so I knew where the thing was going to go back. But I think it would be somewhere around that mark, probably there. I'll take the top off the camera and take note of the direction of travel of the coupling cord as it comes up the pulleys at the top here, where that cord goes to. So the cord wrapping around the drum this way goes to the top pulley at this point and to the back pulley, the rearmost pulley, at this point. And that cord then runs through the rearmost position on this pulley and this idler down to the bottom of the drum at this point, where it runs round the drum in this direction, of course. Well, that's all good. I'll take a still shot of that to remind me exactly where everything fitted, and then I'll remove the meter. Well, I'm happy that I've got a good idea where that cord runs, and I'm going to unhook this spring which tensions up the meter cord, lift the drum off the roller, unwind that cord. Now the cord on this camera unusually is very, very greasy. Like someone was exceptionally generous with grease. I'm not sure why. absolutely packed with grease. Yeah, it's the cord uncoupled, and I've got my little drum pulley off the bottom. I can lift the meter from the top of the camera. The shutter release is dropping out there, and there's the meter complete with the cord. Put that aside. I'll probably wipe down that cord somewhat to remove that sticky grease. It was probably a good lubricant at one stage, now it's just quite sticky. So we can lift off the film release button and its spring, the shutter release shaft and its spring. Take note of those springs. The spring on the film release button is the longer of the two springs. Undo the screw from the top of the strap plug. There may or may not be a washer underneath there. If there is, take note of it. You may need to refit it in the same position. Sometimes you don't. Here we have the hold down strap for the shutter cocking rack. I'll just remove that. Those tweezers will need cleaned up, they're covered in that nasty sticky grease. Lift off the cocking rack, and this rack is pretty much the same as Retina 3C. It's got a little bevel cut in the back of it here to clear the back of the rangefinder, which may or may not be necessary. Loosen the screw on the top of the film advance shaft. That was a little bit loose. The gear, the washer, the drive dog, the spring, this drive dog here, and this component is often just stuck in with grease. Quite sticky. The grease in this camera is quite dry and sticky. For the rest of the body, what do we got here? Well, I can undo the screw on the top of the film release lever. That unlocks the film advance to allow you to wind on after you've fired the shutter. We'll lift that lever out, and that has a small return spring on the base which is easily damaged and lost, so I'm taking that off now so it doesn't get lost in the cleaner. The lock lever here locks the film advance when the frame number 1 is reached. I'll just pull back that little clip, an E clip or a C clip or a SIR clip. Take out our lock lever. This little transfer shaft takes the action from the cocking rack to the shutter at the front of the camera, and as you can see there was a big glob of hardened grease on the back of that. Two screws here left at the top of the camera. One here holds this little ratchet pawl in place, quite apart from the guide bush. This is all very sticky with grease. This should all just come apart, and it doesn't want to, so that is stuck together with grease, or alternatively someone's done something silly with that. Let me have a look. No, that's correctly assembled. I thought for a second someone had put that bush on upside down. The bush has a countersunk face and that must go down, otherwise the screw will bury itself into that countersink and lock that ratchet so that it doesn't do its job. I'll take that spring off and put that to one side so that I don't lose it during the cleaning process. I'll take out this post which holds down the guide for the film advance and also serves as a guide for the cocking rack. Want to take out the sprocket shaft. I've got to take off that rewind button for the sprocket shaft. I need the right tool.